Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT04 and seeing all of the new cards that it has to offer along with some of the starter decks, and it is really interesting to think what all of these new cards could do for some older decks. So one of the older decks that I'm going to be taking a look at updating is going to be RustTyrannomon, and with all of the new cards from the starter deck and BT04, there's definitely a lot of possibility on how to make RustTyrannomon even better than what he was doing before. So going over the deck, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Agumon. So Agumon is in here because it has a really nice inheritable ability where during your turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended during your unsuspend phase, then you get to gain one memory. So because we are a tamer-based deck, we do need to spend some time setting up our tamers a little bit. So we are going to be a little bit memory deficient compared to a lot of other green decks. So any way we can make up that memory is definitely really good and something we're definitely looking to do. But the main Digitama of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Minomon. So Minomon is really nice because it has this nice inheritable ability of when attacking, where if we're attacking one of our opponent's Digimon, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP for the turn. So this is really good because we are a green deck. Our main goal is to try to beat up onto the opponent's Digimon, and we need to make sure we can beat up on the opponent's Digimon by making sure ours is larger. So Minomon just gaining us that plus 1000 DP is really important for the deck. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Goblimon because this is just the value vanilla rookie of the deck, where you know the drill. Low play cost, low evo cost with some decent DP makes it a really decent card to run. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So this Agumon is really nice just because it's doing something the deck wants to be doing, which is DP boosting our Digimon. So that way we could make sure that we clear the opponent's Digimon, and having the inheritable ability where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP just makes it that much easier to get the DP buff to ensure that we could clear the opponent's Digimon. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Palmont. So this Palmont is from the green starter deck, and this Palmont is pretty important to the deck because its inheritable ability is basically the exact same thing as Minomon's, where when you're attacking into one of your opponent's Digimon, then this Digimon gains plus 2000 DP for the turn, where Minomon's is plus 1000, but if you add them together, then it's a plus 3000 boost for just attacking into one of your opponent's Digimon. And that's just a pretty sizable boost for what the deck is trying to be doing, and that's just a pretty decent boost. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Agumon. So this is the red Agumon from BT01, and this Agumon is pretty nice because of its on-play ability where we get to check the top 5 cards of our deck, and then add 1 tamer card among them and put it into our hand, then the rest go to the bottom. So because we are a tamer-based deck and green doesn't necessarily have a dedicated tamer digger, playing this Agumon is really nice, not only because it's red and we have a little bit of red synergy, but because this card just allows us to add tamers to our hand and help us find the important tamers we need. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Kabuterimon. So this Kabuterimon is pretty decent for the deck because he is another Digimon with a solid inheritable to continuously try to DP boost our Digimon to make sure we can hit for as high numbers as possible to clear as many possible targets as we can. So he has this nice inheritable ability where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP for every suspended Digimon the opponent has. So again, just more DP boosting is pretty good and is what the deck wants to be doing. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Stingmon. So Stingmon is pretty decent because he definitely helps a little bit with our memory deficiency by allowing us to gain a memory because of his inheritable ability where during our turn, once per turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then we get to gain 1 memory. So every time we're going to be deleting one of the opponent's Digimon, we're going to be gaining a memory, and that's just pretty decent to think about because gaining that memory could be really important to extend some of our plays or make even more powerful plays possible. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Kabuterimon. So this is the Kabuterimon from the green starter deck, and this is going to be the dedicated blocker. Now, if you wanted to, you could think about utilizing Woodmon, and it will accomplish basically the same role. It's just because we are a tamer-based deck and we are a little bit less memory efficient than some of the other green decks, having the evo cost of 1 is really, really important because it definitely allows us to make our plays much more efficiently because, again, we are a tamer-based deck and we do have to have time to set up our tamers, and that's just not super efficient, so anywhere where we could save memory is really, really good. Next, on to the ultimates. I'm going to be running 4 copies of Agumon. So Agumon is, again, a really solid card because it's basically doing the exact same thing as Stingmon, except on a higher level. And Agumon's ability is not once per turn, where Stingmon's is. But the whole point is it has a nice inheritable where during our turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then we get to gain 1 memory. So again, just all of the same reasons why we're running Stingmon is all of the same reasons why we're running Agumon. Next, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Agumon. So we're only allowed to run 1 copy of this card currently due to the nerfing and limiting of this card, but this card is still very good and very important to run just because of how efficient this card is. So the first big thing about the card is it has the Digisorption ability. So basically when you utilize its Digisorption ability, it evos for basically 0. And that's really, really good because, again, we are just needing to save memory anywhere we can. And then on top of that, it also has a very powerful inheritable ability where when attacking, we could play 1 green level 3 Digimon from our hand suspended for free. And being able to spawn free bodies is really, really good, especially on this when attacking ability, because we're already going to be attacking the opponent's Digimon anyway. So that way we can ensure that even though our Digimon is coming in suspended, it's going to have a very high chance of surviving. So that way next turn it can apply even more pressure onto the opponent, depending on how we utilize the card and what we're going to be playing for free. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Blossomon. So Blossomon is just the other Digimon with Digisorption, and that's the only reason why we're running it. Just because between Blossomon and Agumon, we're going to have 4 Digimon in our deck with Digisorption to, again, try to get into our higher levels as fast and efficiently as we possibly can. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of RustTyrannomon. So RustTyrannomon is going to be the main Mega of the deck and is basically what the entire deck is centered around just because of how good this card can be. So he has 2 really powerful abilities. His first ability is during your turn. While you have a green tamer in play, this Digimon can attack into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon. So he is one of the few cards in the game at this time that can do that, and that's just really, really powerful because whether they're suspended or unsuspended, it doesn't matter. He has the ability to attack into them, and he can clear basically any Digimon relatively easily because of all of the DP boosts that we have going into him, especially if he's attacking into the opponent's Digimon. So that's just what makes him really, really powerful, is the ability to just attack into the opponent's Digimon regardless of what state they're in. And then on top of which, he has another really powerful ability where during your turn, when this Digimon deletes one of your opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then you get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon. So this effect, it doesn't matter as much, but it still could come up in handy depending on how you evolve your board state, because like if you're just swinging into the opponent's big Digimon with RustTyrannomon, you could suspend one of their smaller ones, and then you could have some of your other smaller Digimon go into their small Digimon, and because you're still going to be getting a whole bunch of DP boosts, you're going to have an easier time clearing and controlling the field as a result. So RustTyrannomon is doing some very powerful things and is definitely a really decent card to think about running, especially with a lot of the new support that he's got. And then as far as the other Mega, this could really be anything you want, but I'm just choosing to run 2 copies of Bancho Stingmon just because the deck is kind of piercing focused and trying to attack into the opponent's Digimon focused. So what better card to do that with than Bancho Stingmon, because he just naturally has the piercing ability. He evos for 3 instead of evoing for 4, so he's a little bit more memory efficient. And then on top of which, he still has this really powerful when attacking ability where if you're attacking into one of your opponent's Digimon that has 12,000 or more DP, then this Digimon gets plus 7,000 DP and security tech plus 2. So if RustTyrannomon isn't able to clear out something, then Bancho Stingmon with this ability definitely should be able to. On top of which, he's going to deal a whole bunch of security damage in the process, and that's just what makes Bancho Stingmon really, really good. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Trident Revolver. So Trident Revolver is the big reason why we're playing a couple of red cards in the deck, and is definitely what is allowing RustTyrannomon to be a little bit more efficient than he was before, because of its main ability where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less, and then we get to play 1 Tamer card that has a memory cost of 4 or less from our hand for free. So just this main ability allows us to not only control the board that much easier, but it also allows us to play our Tamers that much more efficiently, and that's what makes playing RustTyrannomon that much easier to do, because we have a card to try to play our Tamers even easier than before. And then on top of all of that, it even has this really nice security ability of activating its main ability, so that way we could even utilize this effect even if it's checked in our security. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Taiga. So Taiga is probably one of the most important Tamers in the whole deck, just because this card is interacting with RustTyrannomon in so many different ways. So the first big way that he's interacting with RustTyrannomon is while this card is on the field, all of your Digimon with Tyrannomon in its name gain the piercing ability. So we already know that RustTyrannomon has the ability to attack into the opponent's unsuspended Digimon. So now with Taiga on the field, he'll gain the piercing ability, so that way when he's doing that, then he's also going to be dealing security damage to the opponent, and that's just really, really powerful. And then on top of which, he has another ability where during your turn, when you Digivolve one of your Digimon into a Digimon with Tyrannomon in its name, then you could suspend this Tamer and reduce the evolution cost by 1. So this is really, really good because it just makes it Digivolving into RustTyrannomon that much more efficient. So that way we don't feel super bad about Digivolving into him, because we know we're not going to be really Digivolving him for 4 most of the time as long as Taiga's on the field. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Ken. So Ken is going to be the dedicated memory fixer of the deck, where his primary purpose is to set our memory to 3 if it's anything less than 3. So you could realistically run any other memory fixing tamer you feel like fits best with the deck, but I just think for what the deck is trying to do, Ken is really nice because of his other ability, where during your turn, when one of your green or blue Digimon deletes one of the opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then we get to suspend this tamer and gain 1 memory. So this basically is just doing the exact same thing as Agumon, and it's doing the exact same thing as Stingmon, where we're just trying to utilize the fact that we're deleting the opponent's Digimon to gain some additional benefits, and that additional benefit is gaining some memory to extend some of our plays to make our plays that much more powerful. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 2 copies of the starter deck Tai Kamiya. So this tamer is really interesting just because it is passively increasing all of our Digimon's DP by 1000 during our turn, and then on top of which it's a really efficient tamer to play because he has a nice low play cost of 2. So this card is not only DP boosting our Digimon, but he's a really cheap and efficient tamer to play. So that way we then have another access point to play Trident Revolver from, because we still are playing the red Agumon to act as a card to play Trident Revolver from. But if we're run out of Agumons or we don't see Agumons, then being able to have Tai Kamiya just stick on the board to be able to play Trident Revolver, to be able to play our other tamers, is just super important. On top of which, he's still accomplishing the same role as what a lot of the other cards are doing, which is just increasing our Digimon's DP to be able to beat up on the opponent's Digimon that much more efficiently. So this card is just working really, really nicely with the deck, even though he doesn't have any direct synergy with RustTyrannomon himself, because RustTyrannomon is always asking for green tamers, and this is red, but again, this is more in the deck for that passive DP boost and to play Trident Revolver. And then there's just so many other green cards that you could possibly think about utilizing in this style of deck. So as I mentioned before, you could think about running Woodmon just because Woodmon is another blocker. So if you want to swap out the blockers or run more blockers, then you have access at doing that. Then you also have access to the Tyrannomon line, just because you are still playing Taiga, and Taiga interacts with the Tyrannomon line. So running them definitely is pretty decent because Taiga can reduce their evolutions, and then they still have some very powerful abilities that synergize with the deck. So you could still run the other Tyrannomon stuff that he came out with. You could think about running a slight Digiburst package, where if you want to incorporate some Digiburst cards, that Lalamon is pretty good at doing that just because she has some nice Digiburst synergy. Then Lilamon is a pretty nice Digimon you could also think about running for some more Digiburst synergy, and then she also has a really good inheritable effect that interacts with the fact that you're playing Tamers. And then you could also think about running Hercules Kabuterimon as an alternate piercer and some more Digiburst support. You also have access to other consistency tools like Wormmon and Tentamon to try to dig for your cards to make sure that you can see the cards that you need to see. You have some other really good DP boosters like Motimon for another Digitama with another DP boost inheritable. Then you also have Gargomon for some more DP boosting that's very similar to Kabuterimon. Then you have Togemon as another DP booster that's similar to the Palmont and the Motimon. Then you have a Rapidmon, which is another DP booster that's similar to Kabuterimon and Gargomon. You also have access to a really good tech card like Terriermon to help shut off the opponent from gaining memory. Then if you feel like you need another card on a lower level to just start aggressing with, Dino Beamon is definitely a really decent card at doing that. Or if you just want another really powerful inheritable to think about utilizing, then Mega Kabuterimon is very, very powerful for his ability to just trash one of the opponent's security for just us deleting one of the opponent's Digimon through battle. Another really good supporting Mega for the deck is Mega Gargomon, just because he is still a very powerful Mega in his own right. But if you also want, you could think about utilizing Chaosmon, because Chaosmon is doing some very similar things to RustTyrannomon, having piercing and can attack into unsuspended Digimon, and he's a level 7, so he's just a really powerful Digimon to think about utilizing. If you wanted to, you could incorporate some of the suspend options. I just feel like based on the deck, you don't really need to, but depending on how you build the deck, you might need to incorporate cards like Flower Cannon or Needle Spray, just because of their security abilities that might be able to save you from losing the game, or if you just need to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down for whatever reason, they're really good options at doing that. And then because you're already going to be resting stuff down, you could think about utilizing Terrace Cluster to act as some really powerful removal. If you wanted to, you could think about playing Hidden Potential Discovered. Even though this card is limited to 1, it's still a very powerful card to just think about utilizing to just evo to RustTyrannomon for free. And then one of the more powerful option cards that you could think about utilizing is Dimension Scissor, just because you could attack into their unsuspended Digimon with RustTyrannomon, and then you could utilize Dimension Scissor just to clear their whole board. And then there's some other really decent tamers that you could think about running. So if you're really worried about consistency, you could think about utilizing Izzy to try to draw more cards. Or you could think about utilizing Mimi to just turbo out your raising area, so that way you could apply even more pressure onto the opponent and Digivolve that much more efficient and faster than your opponent. So like I said, these are just a couple of the tools that Green has access to, and there's definitely a whole bunch of different ways you could build and modify the deck. So this is just my interpretation of what a RustTyrannomon deck is going to look like in BT04. Keep in mind, RustTyrannomon still isn't going to be highly meta competitive, but he's still definitely a really fun and interesting deck that has a whole bunch of different ways you could build the deck based on the types of synergies and support you want to play him with. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, I'll have the deck listed down in the description below. And down in the description below will also be my TCG Player affiliate link. So whenever you use that link to purchase cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will end up supporting me and the channel. And then on top of that, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you in the next video.